Republican Senator Richard Burr apparently had warned some of his very wealthy donors during a luncheon that coronavirus was going to hurt them economically, that it was going to be a huge societal issue, that they should prepare for it. And mind you, he was telling them and warning them weeks ahead of the American people finding out just how serious the spread of coronavirus was and how we needed to practice social distancing. So many people, of course, have been laid off already. The unemployment rate is starting to rise. And so the fact that Richard Burr, a Republican senator and also the chair of the Intelligence Committee in the Senate, felt the need to warn his wealthy donors, but didn't really ring that alarm to the American people is so incredibly disgusting and frustrating. And NPR apparently was able to obtain audio. It was a secret recording from this luncheon that took place on February 27th, okay? So February 27th, his donors were warned about what was gonna happen while we were kind of in the dark. Let me give you those details. He said the following to these people. There's one thing that I can tell you about this. It is much more aggressive in its transmission than anything that we've seen in recent history. It is probably more akin to the 1918 pandemic. Also, 13 days before the State Department began to warn Americans against travel to Europe, and 15 days before Trump banned travelers from Europe into the United States, during the luncheon, Senator Burr said the following: every company should be cognizant of the fact that you may have to alter your travel. You may have to look at your employees and judge whether the trip they're making to Europe is essential or whether it can be done on video conference. Why risk it? I mean, this story put me in a fit of rage because this whole pandemic really did, it blindsided a lot of Americans. Like a lot of people didn't expect, like everything happened quickly. Like, of course, there was news of there was news of coronavirus for months, but Trump was, telling people it's not a big deal. He was downplaying it. Richard Burr was not making these types of comments publicly at all. And so people are gonna think like, I didn't even think that we'd have to like self-quarantine. I didn't think that we'd have to do social distancing. I didn't think we'd have to be working from home. I didn't think most people would end up getting laid off or losing their jobs. Right. And I'm paying attention to the news, and it was completely downplayed by our lawmakers. And the fact that these wealthy individuals were warned about it, his donors were warned about it before anyone else knew, before average Americans knew, is so disgusting. And it really does speak volumes of the disgusting corruption we have in this country.
Yeah, and think about how powerful it could have been if he actually was this worried, if he understood what was going to happen. And it's not like it's just like he came up with his fears. He's talking to people inside. He had secret information that we didn't have at that point. Think about how powerful it would have been if he had come forward and actually told the American people about it. If he'd gone on Fox News and given them a dose of inconvenient facts, because this was in the thick of Donald Trump and every one of the most trusted right-wing media figures in the country telling them this is a complete hoax. People are freaking out for nothing. The only reason they're doing this is because they want to hurt Donald Trump. All of it is fake and made up. And he apparently knew that it wasn't, but the people he was telling are only rich people who potentially could save themselves. And we're finding out today, apparently, he sold like $500,000 to $1.5 million in stock after telling everyone that we're fine.
He needs to face criminal, like, how is that not considered insider trading? Right?
I don't know.
He has intel. He has intel that the public doesn't have access to, clearly, right? And he is using that to make decisions about his stocks. Like, that's insane to me. And by the way, here's what should infuriate people even more, right? It's already a crazy story, but we know that there are a bunch of craven Republicans who only care about their political careers. And as a result, they avoid criticizing Donald Trump or telling the truth while Donald Trump is actually lying to the American people. Richard Burr is not seeking re-election. He is not seeking re-election. So he has the freedom, he has the liberty right? To go out there and warn the American people about what the reality is. And he didn't do that. He reserved that information for his wealthy donors. And look, I'm gonna give you more of what he told them, but I wanna give you some context and background information about what this luncheon was. As I mentioned earlier, it took place on February 27th. So again, well before the American people knew just like the seriousness and the gravity of what we're dealing with. And the luncheon had been organized by something called the Tar Heel Circle. It's a nonpartisan group whose membership consists of businesses and organizations in North Carolina. So membership to the Tar Heel Circle cost between $500 and $10,000. And on the day that he warned his donors about what was really going on with coronavirus, in attendance were dozens of invited guests representing companies and organizations from North Carolina. According to federal records, those companies or their political committees donated more than $100,000 to Burr's election campaign in 2015 and 2016. This is what they pay for, right? They pay, they contribute to candidates and their donors for these candidates because they do get special treatment. They get special treatment in legislation, certainly, and they get special treatment when it comes to protecting themselves both physically and financially when things get serious, when something terrible happens and when there's a crisis.
Yeah, I mean, look, him individually, he probably saved himself at least hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more. And God only knows how many people he knows that did the same, that they saved a ton of money. And the issue is that while I look at this as, well, obviously he's going to jail, right? This is obviously insider trading and probably coordinated with a number of other people. We have no real reason to believe that that's going to happen because this sort of behavior has been going on throughout the Trump administration. I mean, it's been going on for a long time too, but it's much more obvious. I mean, in the run up to the limited, situation that we had with Iran earlier this year. There was all that suspicion that defense stocks were being like purchased right in advance of it. Donald Trump was talking about a number of individual drugs that supposedly he's going to like have them roll out in greater numbers because supposedly it might be able to help with coronavirus. And the share price shot up for those companies. Now it turns out it's not even close to being ready. It's gonna be a long time from now. But if you knew that he was gonna make that announcement for that one company, let alone the others, you could have just made a ton of money in a short period of time. And look at his press conference like 2 weeks ago where he was naming CEO after CEO. I'm sure people were making money off of that. And do you really think that Donald Trump would feel any sort of ethical compunctions from sharing what companies he was going to spotlight or imply were going to be involved in this effort? He personally has benefited.
Has he ever felt any ethical compunctions? Like
he doesn't have that part of his brain, nor can he pronounce the word.
Right. No, it really is incredible. And any other average person would certainly face criminal charges for insider trading. But these people are above the law. And while we're sitting around debating whether American workers should get $1,000 in their checks, or should they be means tested, or should they get $2,000? They're out there robbing people. Like they're out there breaking the law to further enrich themselves. That's what we're dealing with right now. Let me give you more of what he said. So 16 days before North Carolina closed its schools due to the threat of coronavirus, Burr warned that it could happen. So 16 days before, he's talking to his donors and he says this: there will be, I'm sure, times that communities, probably some in North Carolina, have a transmission rate where they say, let's close schools for 2 weeks, everybody stay home. Like if everyone was warned ahead of time, think about how much more prepared you would be for what we're experiencing right now.
Yeah.
That's one other part of this that just really kills me, because I think about I don't procrastinate with taxes. I already did my taxes, right? And I didn't have to. I didn't have to pay my taxes as early as I did, and I would have felt a lot safer right now and a lot more stable right now if I had that money, just there in case I needed it during this pandemic. And I'm sure a lot of Americans are in the same place, and they didn't need to be.
Yeah, exactly. Like he could have provided to his constituents, the country at large, Fox News. Hell, he could have just sat down with Donald Trump and gotten him to accept it a few weeks earlier. I mean, Donald Trump is just like barely taking this seriously now. Imagine if he had a month ago or 2 months ago, if he had already, if he had put in like government orders for ventilators to distribute or face masks, or if he had actually cared about the testing kits, which he implied today that they've always taken the testing kits seriously and they've been pushing for them from the very beginning. Like West Virginia got like its first testing kit like yesterday. If he had done that a couple of months ago, we probably wouldn't need to be doing what we're doing now.
That's a great point.
And that's another reason why the Democrats' bungling of this is so frustrating, because like if there was ever gonna be some conceivable silver lining out of this horrendous situation, it's that this has been the ultimate demonstration of the conservative lack of regard for government and what it can accomplish, that they don't want it to be capable. Because generally when things are just going, regular situation, the government getting out of their way is a good thing. And they just roll along, they make a bunch of money. But when it's an emergency, you do need government. And they're demonstrating that they're not set up in a way that they can run a government in an emergency. And unfortunately, the Democrats they're sort of muddying the waters, and they're making it look like kind of a wash, like nobody's serious, nobody can get it done.
It's really, yeah. I mean, lives could have been saved. There could have been better preparation. It's frustrating to see just how much corruption really takes place, and how these lawmakers really have no interest in representing us or our best interests. Just the bare minimum, keeping us safe.